Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mayor Nenshi, Bill Smith, Andre Chabot. So, I'm going to start off with something that has been a concern to realtors for some time. And after nearly 5 years of discussion and negotiation, the revised Municipal Government Act and proposed city charter draft regulations are here, with the expectation of it passing sometime this fall. So, Mayor Nenshi, how do you propose to use the changes in municipal powers to better serve homeowners?
Thanks very much. The discussion and the ratification of the city charter is actually the biggest change in the relationship between the provincial and the municipal governments since Alberta became a province in 1905. And I'm very proud of the work that's been done there. Now, what the city charter does is it allows us to cut a lot of regulatory red tape, a lot of regulatory burden, by better aligning decision-making authority to the order of government that actually has to deal with the issue. So to give you an example, we've had a lot of trouble in the past with environmental work where only Alberta Environment could enter contaminated land within the city of Calgary, but they didn't have the expertise to do it. So we've managed to align all of that. The other big part of the city charter is an agreement in principle on a fiscal framework so that the capital funding for our city projects like transit and roads and social infrastructure, it will no longer be ad hoc and episodic, but that the city will be guaranteed a certain percentage of provincial revenue. So we'll be having those conversations over the next few months. Hopefully we'll be able to ratify that, whoever's in this chair, in early part of next year. So that should allow the city to do a lot more thoughtful planning in terms of large capital projects by having a really good sense of what's coming up instead of relying on the vagaries of changing provincial governments. The other piece that will really make a big difference is reducing the regulatory burden. In particular in the area of assessment and taxation. We can talk a lot more about assessment at some point if you like as well. But that really should allow us to cut red tape even more to be able to serve businesses and citizens more efficiently. I got to tell you, some parts of the city charter stuff are as dry as toast. And even I glaze over a little bit reading about the changes to the assessment practices and so on. But it's all very, very important, and it really is all about simplifying, reducing regulatory burdens, cutting red tape, and allowing the city to actually take advantage of the fact that we've got 20,000 professional colleagues working with us and we have the ability to get things right.
It's going to be a bit challenging for us as a city because through the process of reducing red tape, it's actually going to create some problems for the city of Calgary. Currently, if you want to appeal an assessment, you have to first get leave to appeal, and that gets reviewed before it actually goes to the courts. Now, which probably is going to be beneficial to you guys, I guess, the way it's currently drafted, you don't have to go through the leave to appeal process and go directly to the courts if the ARB does not rule in your favor. We are hoping to be able to do more as far as the appointments to the ARB, maybe not so much to the MGB, but obviously we are going to be working with the province on that front. And another thing that the mayor didn't mention is more flexibility within our finances, which might be scary to some of you guys, but because we have a lot of financial knowledge and depth within the city of Calgary, that we will be given more flexibility in regards to the maximum allowable debt that we'll be able to take on. So as long as we continue to maintain our Standards & Poor's rating and we have a cost recovery mechanism, we will have some additional flexibility in regards to the amount that we can borrow. Right now, it's 2 times our gross, but we'll have the flexibility to go beyond that. And of course, there will be a lot of oversight in regards to the financial viability of that. And I think the mayor covered pretty much the rest of it.
You know, I think there's a couple of things, and I like the fact that that there's some changes to the assessment piece, because I know that Altus Group, if you know them, want to stay in business, but if it can be more streamlined and more user-friendly, I think that would be great for everybody. There are a couple of clauses that I've had a chance to go through, and I really haven't delved deep into them, but there's one that appears to read that if you've got if you've got some raw land, some agricultural land that you're going to be developing, and you get your a couple of your approvals, your first stages of your approvals, then the city would have the ability to then apply a tax to that based on the completed community per se. That's a little disconcerting if you're a developer, and I think we need to be really careful about whether we walk down that road or not. I actually am. I think that the city charter in general is great. I was also happy to see that there wasn't a lot of opportunity for the city to tax more, because I think that whenever you get taxing power, you tend to use it, and that's. I think we've seen enough of that over the last few years from all levels of government.
Is there anything in the lack of there being ability for new taxes that would be concerning in the future? And I'm kind of asking a leading question, because part of our concern about the new MGA is that this might create taxation powers that could lead to a land transfer tax. So obviously in Ontario, consumers there are burdened with not only provincial tax, but in Toronto, a Toronto tax. So we're concerned about the ability of Calgarians to achieve their dream of owning a home.
Yeah, I think that I think that the Toronto tax, and I think it's probably we're thinking the same one that they did in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. I think those were reasonable given the circumstances that people were facing there, and I don't see that currently being an issue with the city of Calgary. A transfer tax for land is, as we know, it's something that happens in BC, and they get their 1% on each side of the transaction. I hope that we don't wind up doing that here. I think there are lots of things we need to do on the restraint side of the fiscal side of the book, as opposed to looking for more ways to earn revenue at this point.
Okay, so Mayor Nenshi, is either a provincial or a municipal land transfer tax a good idea in any form?
No, we've never advocated for that. I personally believe that a land transfer tax is a particularly market distorting tax, and I believe the taxation should always be fair and be related to value being generated. So it's never been on the table. I don't mind saying that out loud. There were certain other taxes that were on the table that came off the table. In the end, the only thing that came on the table was a refined destination marketing fee, if you prefer hotel tax, because the way the system works right now is very inefficient. It's a voluntary tax. Some hotels actually charge it, but don't ever remit it to anybody. That's no good. So that's the only thing that'll change on a tax side here. Now, I will tell you that after the next provincial election, if I am still in this chair, it will be time to have a broader community conversation around the operating side of the business. The new fiscal framework is only on the capital side. On the operating side, as you all know, the city has access only to the property tax and to various user fees and levies. And I happen to think that the property tax, as designed in Alberta, is a particularly lousy form of taxation, especially for business, because it has no relation to value being generated. It has relation only to value of the dirt. And as a result, it's unfair to seniors, people on fixed income, unfair to small business. And if there isn't community appetite to have a conversation on the operating side, I'd be very willing to open up that conversation and talk about how we can reduce our reliance on the property tax.
Andre, any thoughts on that?
First of all, the City Charter and the Modernized Municipal Government Act, while we've advocated for certain positions, ultimately what's been put forward is not actually within the control of the City of Calgary. So we discussed things that we wanted and things we didn't want, and the province then came out with their draft regulations. I had a chance to actually advocate against that, not only in our City Charter discussions, but also through my involvement through AUMA for the MGA amendments, because this isn't just a City Charter issue. They're actually trying to impose it through the Modernized Municipal Government Act as well. So I don't agree with that. I believe that until such time as somebody at least starts turning dirt to be able to do something, that we should not be assessing it based strictly on land value. I'm just trying to recall the other thing that the mayor mentioned about tax revenue. Oh yeah, destination marketing fund. If memory serves me correctly, the intent is to also have us administer it.
Correct.
So it certainly will give us more ability to do more from a tourism perspective, to make use that we maximize on those dollars to help to promote our city, obviously to the benefit of the city of Calgary as well as all the businesses, and of course heads and beds. And so support that particular amendment.
Council has spent an inordinate amount of time on secondary suites, and I know you've had some thoughts on some reforms to this, and obviously we've got a process that needs attention. But how can we resolve this and get back to the business of governing the city overall? It seems like it's a micro issue that's turned into quite a distraction.
So it's been a very challenging issue. As you probably know, I brought forward many notices of motion that help to facilitate some of the development, including the amount of your basement that can be developed, the development permit exemption that was introduced as a pilot program initially, now been made permanent, again, to facilitate development of secondary suites. One of the things that I brought forward recently was kind of a carrot and a stick approach. And I don't believe that a blanket approval throughout the city is going to work. And we have lots of examples of that in my ward, where there's R2 zones that have now turned into slums, essentially, where every single home has turned into a secondary suite and has not gone through the regulatory approvals. So land use in itself is not the solution. But there is a way that we can actually get around facilitating more development where it makes sense, in close proximity to LRT stations, as well as post-secondary education facilities. But with the carrot, we need to have a stick. And so every single suite that goes through our code compliance regime now, which is not as onerous as getting a development permit and a building permit, will get a sticker and be registered on the City of Calgary's website on the suite registry program, which is also my notice of motion. So this happens with every single suite that goes through our program, automatically gets registered on the City of Calgary's suite registry program. So if you want to create a secondary suite, a legal one, even through a more broad-based approach for zoning in close proximity to those important locations, great, you get registered on the City of Calgary's website. Now here comes the stick. The stick is, you're not allowed to advertise unless you're registered on the City of Calgary's registry. I know this may sound a little heavy-handed, but the biggest challenge with trying to make sure suites are safe and legal is gaining entry. We cannot gain entry because through the courts, we're not allowed to go on people's property to gather evidence. So how do we gather evidence? We go to the door and we say, you must let us see your home. But people, especially people who've bought lots of properties and have many secondary suites, understand the process. And they know that they can just say no, because it's my home. You need a court order to gain entry. So the stick here is that if you create a bylaw that says you cannot advertise unless you're registered on the City of Calgary suite registry, then you are in violation of a City of Calgary bylaw and a fine associated with it, which gives us the tool, an additional tool, to gain entry to make sure that fire traps are made safe. And so City of Calgary is not in a huge enforcement side of things. We're more into encouraging compliance. So we don't kick anybody out right now. You ask any one of our development officers what the approach that they take. The approach that they take with secondary suites is to encourage compliance. And that's ultimately what I'm after, is to make those illegal suites safe, and I think we need the carrot and the stick to make that happen.
Okay, so Billy, you've been on the sidelines as we have been watching this. So do you have a solution for this problem?
On the sidelines?
Yeah.
Is it a football thing? No, put me in.
Innocently.
Put me in, coach. I think the three of us would agree on the first thing, that safety is critical for these, and the people that are living in these suites need to be in a situation that's compliant, so that their safety is held at the utmost importance. I have a particular thought that, you know, if you're an R1 zone, that you picked an R1 zone for a particular reason. That's the sort of lifestyle that you wanted, and that's the sort of community you were looking for. I think there are lots of opportunities within other communities to have secondary suites, but it has to be looked at, I think, really important on a whole continuum of house affordability and attainability and all of those things. And we need to make sure that we have different inventory along the spectrum to help people out. And one of the things right now is we've got, I think there's 4,000 people on an affordable housing list, and unfortunately there's only going to be about 88 or 100 units come up this year for them to move into. So, you know, I think if we can make some progress on those types of things and create more opportunities there, maybe some opportunities for the private sector to take over the physical part of these buildings, and we take over the social part of helping people on that spectrum. I think we can alleviate a bunch of the issues.
Look, this is one area on which the three of us up here significantly disagree. And I think it's important to underline that. I have stood in this room so many times over the last 7 years talking about this issue. And I want to really thank CREB for your support and your advocacy on this issue, because you've got it right. And council has not had the political courage to be able to move forward on this. So to use one of Bill's football analogies, Andre has helped move the ball down the field, but I'm sick of the first downs. We actually have to score here. We actually have to get to the end zone. And nibbling around the edges of this and saying ridiculous things like R1 neighborhoods are for R1 people doesn't make any sense at all. We spent 20% of our time in council in 2016 going through applications in R1 neighborhoods, one at a frickin' time. Those people come to council, they tell us horrible stories, they have to expose the most intimate details of their private lives in front of 15 people sitting above them, literally above them, at council. They have to tell us about losing their jobs, about their mother-in-law becoming paralyzed after a stroke, why they need a secondary suite. We're not even allowed to vote based on those things, but people feel the need to come in and tell us that. And we approve 85% of them. This is a ridiculous situation. It's robbing people of time, of money, and of dignity. There are 35,000 people in this city who live in illegal suites. Those people have no protection under the law. If the smoke detector doesn't work, if there's mice, if there's mold, if the landlord is abusing them, they got nothing they can do. They got nowhere they can go. This is not a morally correct position. It's not ethical, it's not right. Every single Calgarian deserves the benefit of the protection of the law. And every other city in the country, except for Burnaby, BC, don't ask, has solved this. This is not rocket science. They've solved it. They've made it a by right opportunity in every land zone use to have the opportunity to apply for a secondary suite if you meet a set of stringent criteria. You got to meet code, safety, fire, building code. You got to make sure you can handle parking. And you have to, of course, as everyone does, abide by community bylaw standards. Legalizing and regulating means safer suites come on the market. It means you crowd out the slumlords, and it is ultimately the solution that every other city has come to. The vast majority of Calgarians agree with this opinion in every survey. It's time to have the political courage and get her done.
I did want to spend some time talking about the new changes to the marijuana legislation and the fact that this is a great concern to Calgary homeowners and the misuse of residential properties for this product to be developed and so on. And then, of course, the question turns, especially with what's happened in Ontario, to what retailing looks like. Obviously, that's not necessarily the council's job to be concerned directly with that, but what are your thoughts, Mayor, on what the future holds?
I can go through this quite quickly. The City of Calgary has a position that we have put forward to the provincial government on this. Ultimately, the province has to make some decisions very quickly so that the city can get our bylaws in place. We are recommending a retail network similar to the current alcohol retail network of privatized stores. You won't be able to sell marijuana in the same store that you sell alcohol. But that'll make our zoning, which Andre knows more about than I do, very easy in terms of following similar rules to how we deal with alcohol. We have to deal with issues around secondhand smoke and so on. But I want to specifically get to the question you're asking about use of residential properties. The federal government, by the way, I said at Mount Royal University answering this question the other night that I am the squarest, nerdiest person you'll ever meet in your life. And boy, now I know more about marijuana than I ever thought I would. But the federal task force in this area has recommended that individuals can have up to 4 plants in their home. And we have endorsed that as a city because we think that's the level where you don't have to worry about code or anything like that. It's like having 4 African violets in your house. But what that'll do is that will allow the bylaw officers to really, really enforce against illegal grow-ops. Because if you can say 4 plants is fine, if you're running a big grow-op, you're really afoul of the law. And so that should actually assist a lot in the problem that I know many of you have had with homes becoming grow-ops and how you remediate that. So hopefully that is one of the real benefits of the federal government's plan here to legalize. What else? Did I forget anything, Andre? I feel like I covered off most of what we've talked about here. So the point is that it's going to take an enormous amount of work for us to get ready for this in time for the federal government's July 2018 deadline. We're ready to do it, but we need the federal government and the provincial government to get the frameworks in place so that we can move forward with this as quickly as possible.
Question to Bill now on the energy ratings for homes. So with our commitment to the Paris Climate Accord and the city charters requiring cities to develop climate change mitigation and adaptation plans, one could argue that some type of Energy Star rating program and energy audit for homes seems inevitable. Mr. Smith, how do you envision these programs working with the city, and how do you propose that these programs work without passing the costs on to prospective buyers or penalizing home sellers?
That's a tough one because I don't know a lot about it, to be honest. You know, I know that one of the things I'm hearing from some of my clients that are building homes these days is the envelope is so tight now that you have to have these air exchangers, which adds on several $1,000s to the cost. And of course, the builder doesn't want to pay that. However, it needs to be done. I think if we're going to be responsible as a community in terms of our environmental stewardship and our carbon footprint, we need to have rules like that in place, and we need to adhere to it. And if those types of things come along, then unfortunately, the market's going to have to bear whatever the market's going to have to bear on that.
Okay. Mayor Nenshi, what can you share about the city's leadership on climate change mitigation?
I'm very proud of the city's environmental plans on all of this work. We actually met our Kyoto targets, remember those? Many, many years ago. The city runs on 100% renewable energy through our participation with NMAX in the electricity grid. We've been leaders in that. So you may not know that NMAX, over the course of the last term of council, has gone from actually over the last 2 terms of council has gone from almost 100% coal-powered electricity to 0%. And so we continue to do that kind of work, which we think is part of our commitment under various treaties in any case. And the municipalities have always been way ahead of the provincial and federal governments on this kind of work. Safeguarding air, land, and water, I can go on and on and on about it. On your energy efficiency question, this too is going to have to be something where regulation and the market have to work in lockstep. I've actually been a little bit critical of the provincial government's energy efficiency audits program because it seems to me to be a little too much money from government for things that make sense for people to do anyway. There's real cost benefits to switch out your light bulbs with LED light bulbs, so why should the government be paying for the LED light bulbs rather than educating people on the importance of switching out? So I think we'll get this right, and I think as Bill says, it's something that the market will settle out on over time, but I worry a little bit about a heavy hand of regulation when we can use market forces to help people become more efficient.
So energy efficiency, if I may, what the City of Calgary is looking at doing, and we just actually talked about that, is creating a uniform set of guidelines that we can then utilize to determine what level of efficiency each individual home or business has achieved And that can then be utilized as a selling feature if you achieve LEED Gold or LEED Platinum. It's something that's more uniformly applied regardless of what built form you're looking at. And so if you do have to incur additional costs to make a home or a business that much more efficient, hopefully you can use that as a selling feature to maybe sell some more efficient product to end users. The issue around climate change and how it relates to the City of Calgary, the province is collecting a carbon levy, which you probably heard about. It's impacted the City of Calgary to the tune of about $6 million a year, and no ability for cost recovery, except for this new introduction that they just made, in that they're trying to convert 5,000 megawatts of non-renewable generation to green energy. And so City of Calgary, through NMAX, we will be maximizing on those levies and those grant programs so that we can actually build more wind and solar generation, and hopefully actually reduce the price of some of that green electricity. One of our biggest challenges right now is our LRT Ride the Wind. The price for that electricity was negotiated a while back when electricity prices were really high and green energy was even higher. So we're paying significant amount of money to use green energy to run our light rail transit. But once that contract is up and there's more green energy on the grid, we should be able to negotiate those prices down to something that's a little more reasonable or closer to what would have been formerly coal-fired generation.
So talking about price, in consultation with the Calgary Housing Affordability Collective, the city developed the Foundations of Home, Calgary's corporate affordable housing strategy. The question to you is, how would you implement this strategy as mayor, or would you seek a new direction?
I think Edmonton's actually been way more successful than we have in regards to getting some lands that would be controlled under the Joint Use Coordinating Committee, Municipal Reserve, and getting some of that land released to the municipality at a nominal fee, and then using those lands as a city's contribution towards affordable housing, and working in partnership with the private sector to actually deliver the product, so very little cost to taxpayers, potential benefit for the developers, and then using our land as leverage to have them contribute affordable housing back to the City of Calgary. They could become part of our inventory then. We could use rent geared to income for our facilities, but provide the opportunity for mixed market so that we don't create slums or simply low income individuals all in one building. If we can incorporate a mixture of all, then we would encourage people to I guess, see things maybe from a different perspective than if you're always surrounded from people with low incomes. So it's a way for the private sector to partner up with us, but certainly it's something we need to continue to work with the province on so that they can release some of those surplus lands, a lot of those vacant school sites that could be better utilized by the municipality, and partner up with the private sector to be actually delivering it.
Sure. Bill, do you have a stand on housing affordability?
Well, I think for the most part I agree with Andre, and I'm not sure if I quite heard the nuance in what you said, but from my perspective, it would be better if the private sector was the building owner and we provided whatever it was, and I'm not sure if that's what you said, Andre, because they're better at it than we would generally be, and we would provide the services, we would provide the assistance to the folks that were within those types of units, and I just think that's a very good model, but we have to clearly pay attention to that as we go forward to make sure that we're not being taken advantage of by the building owner.
So it starts with the land. Okay. Good way to talk about an arena development. Do you have a preferred location for an arena, or hang on a minute here, are we still talking about a cultural and entertainment district? It seems like in the last little while the word arena jumps out more than anything.
Yeah, this might make the discussion interesting, hey, as we go for the next few minutes. As far as I understand, from my perspective as a non-member of council, there's still two proposals on the table. The Calgary Next project, I don't believe, has been voted off. as of yet, and then there's some discussion around a Victoria Park project. I think, and then we've got, as of today, we've got 2 pie charts to look through. Each of them has some differences. One, I think, includes the demolition of Saddle Dome and the extension of 17th Ave, and the other one talks about a CRL. And I think that, I think there's probably a lot of work to be done on both. When you look at CRL, you really need to have some actuarial work done on what is the return truly in real dollars back to the city over time. I'm not sure that there is the opportunity to do that within the area over there in Victoria Park as proposed. But I have to say that it appears that this has been this whole deal has been deliberately negotiated to an impasse in order to become an election issue. I think that I've had experience in working across the table from Calgary Sports and Entertainment when I was on the McMahon Stadium Society. I was able to get a deal done with them there. I'd be happy to sit down with them on the 17th of October and see if we can get a deal done with them on a new arena.
Mayor Nenshi.
I think we have to go a little bit further than that, with all due respect, Bill. I think people deserve to know what you think is fair. We've had 5 debates now. You've never had the opportunity to actually say what you're going to do, other than you're such a great negotiator, you're going to get a great deal with Gary Bettman. That hasn't worked for any other mayor in the world. And really, this isn't about who's at the table. This is about dollars and cents. We have to remember that a new arena is not about winning a Stanley Cup. It's not about putting a better team on the ice. It's about getting more revenue from each user of the arena. It's about making money. And so the question that we have to ask ourselves as citizens is, what do we think is fair? For many months, council has said any public dollars have to have public benefit. And we've been very open about how you define public benefit. Is it money? Is it community use of the facility? Is it development that happens around the facility? Is it that intangible thing about how exciting it is to have a hockey team downtown? All of those things are part of the conversation here. And last week, council authorized me to release the details of the city's deal. Andre voted against it. Council authorized me to actually take it out of the back room. And I think that the deal we put on the table is eminently fair. It says that the city will pay 1/3, that like everybody else, the Flames will either pay property tax if they own the building, or some rent if they don't own the building, like every other team in the league does that doesn't own their own building. And that we together will develop the area around it to make sure that, unlike the Saddle Dome that's been there for 34 years and nothing has developed around it, will actually be a cornerstone for real development in that neighborhood. And I think that's fair. People could disagree with me. And if you think something else is more fair, I think that's fine. Now, the Flames deal that they put out today suggests that the city fronts about 2/3 of the cost, that they said they're going to front it all because they count the ticket tax as they're fronting it, but they want the city to borrow the money for them, which means the city is fronting it. And the city gets $0 out. No rent, no property tax, no revenue. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's reasonable. We live in a country where there are 7 NHL teams. 5 of them have privately owned arenas. Only Calgary and Edmonton are publicly owned. And so there's a different deal here. And again, people can go on and on about, oh, Mr. King is this, the mayor is that. Mr. King and the mayor have never sat at a negotiating table on this. There are negotiators who are working on this. It's about dollars and cents. No one's tried to make this an election issue. In fact, I would love to be talking about much more important things than this. But the Flames chose to drop this bomb in the middle of the election because they'd rather have a more compliant mayor in the deal. And we got to be honest about that. And Mr. Smith, you got to admit to the fact that in the provincial election, when you were president of the PC party, You accepted nearly $500,000, your single largest donor by far, from the owner of the Edmonton Oilers. And shortly thereafter, negotiated a deal that gave the Oilers hundreds of millions of dollars of public money. You got to stand up for it and tell us, are they giving you money this time? And how much you're willing to give them.
So I'm sorry, if I draw the connection, I volunteered with the provincial party, and then I signed a deal with the owner for a multi-billion-dollar thing in Edmonton. Is that the connection we've got here?
You accepted money from him.
No, I'm
As
sorry.
you accepted money
I'm
from a bunch of
sorry, I asked
construction
you-
deals.
I
You
asked
sat in
you a
lobbying meetings
question.
with him.
Could you
and
answer?
the
This
government
is typical
approved that
of you.
mechanism. That's
This
the
is
answer.
typical of you.
Yeah, you asked a question, I just answered.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did. Here's the deal. You were a volunteer. You were
So
the head fundraiser for the party.
where's my
You
connection?
accepted the deal.
I work
mean,
as a
you
lawyer
tell me
here
if
in
there was no
Calgary.
connection. If there was no
I
quid
work
pro
here as a lawyer
quo,
here in
stand up in
Calgary.
front of people and say the $500,000 you
You know-
took had no bearing on the decision you influenced. Feel free to say that.
You,
People can tell me
sir,
whether they
are
believe it.
quite a deal. I can't get over you.
I can't get over the fact, sir.
All you do is you want conflict. You've created a culture of conflict everywhere you've gone. You created one with developers 4 years ago. You created another one with Uber, which was brilliant, by the way. Well done.
Yeah, because
And
we
now
actually
you've
got the
created-
single best
now you've
Uber
created-
regulation of any city in North America.
Now you've created one with the Calgary Flames for your
I haven't
own
created
benefit.
it. Who came out
I
in
don't
front
understand
and did it?
you
Well, Mr.
at
Smith.
all.
Mr.
At
Smith,
all.
I'm-
You know what? You keep interrupting me, and you've done this entire number of forums that we've gone through. You have not allowed anybody to finish the sentence because for some reason you believe you are the smartest person in the room, and you always think you're standing on this high ground. I don't believe that's the case, and I am growing very weary of your rudeness, and no wonder nobody wants to deal with you. Look at your
So-
pompousness.
All right, so Mr. Smith, let's talk about that for a minute. You just called me pompous, you called me arrogant, and yet you say I'm the one creating conflict. I asked you a basic question. If it's easy to answer this one, Mr. Smith, I'll give you the way out.
No,
Tell us
no,
who
no,
gave
you
you.
don't set all the rules, my
Tell
friend.
us who gave
you
us.
Think you sell,
tell us
set all
who
the rules?
who
No.
is giving money to your campaign, and you're done.
Says the
If you
guy with
refuse
the
to
illegal
tell us that. Well,
donation
that's a-
from the Ottawa Red Blacks.
Yeah, so Mr. Smith, when you were president of the PC party, you accepted 60 illegal donations.
No, I did
that the
not.
That the chief
I
electoral
did not.
officer ruled to be illegal,
You know what?
including,
They
by
were-
the way,
they were
including, let
from-
me finish, including, by the way, a $25,000 donation from the chief operating officer of the Edmonton Oilers, who didn't live in Alberta. You gave him back the money, and he gave you back the money through his company, which is exactly what you were criticizing me for, except the numbers are much smaller.
While the discussion is happening about the disclosure of donors, you've indicated you have a plan for that, which is interesting. And but I want to first have you talk to us about why you voted against the motion to release the details of the proposal.
Thank you. So, from my perspective, the reason that I did not want to release the details is the way the whole thing played out. So the Flames came out with some numbers, and why did they even come out with any numbers? And hang on a second, I've got to take my gloves off. Respectfully. So the mayor talked about something that the Stampede Board and the city have been in discussion about with regard to creating an entertainment district. And in his promotion of part of the intent or what he would like to do, he went so far as to say that the arena would be a nice to have, but it's not essential. He didn't say it wasn't critical. He just said, well, it may not or may not be essential. So that kind of triggered the Flames to respond to that. So of course, the Flames didn't want to take that lying down, and they come out and gave us some vague sort of descriptions about what the funding model looked like. And they came out just saying 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. They didn't give any details about it. They just, gave some very, high levels sort of an overview. Then council decided, and I voted against it, to release those numbers, and then we subsequently did. And I thought, why do we want to provide some detail? Because honestly, not all the detail's there. You look at where's the $130 million coming from? If we're still in negotiations or we're still intent on negotiating with them, I think 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 says enough about the deal that we have. Now you start going into details about how much the Calgary's putting in, how much extra costs there are. Then you're doing nothing but prompting a response from the other side. And frankly, again, a little bit maybe to Mr. Smith's comments, I'm not sure that I trusted what was actually going to come out when it came public. It's kind of a little up in the air these days when we give direction to, okay, yeah, make it public. All right, what exactly are we going to say? Well, because I can't control what's coming out of someone else's mouth. But to the mayor's defense, I think ultimately every single candidate that's running for mayor needs to say, what is it that you're prepared to put forward towards this deal? Because Calgarians want to know, are you going to use property tax dollars to fund this for-profit organization that wants to pay no property tax and have us deliver all of these extra services for police protection, for traffic control, and incur all of these other operational costs associated with this Flames organization with no cost recovery potential? I think asking Calgarians to eat what they're trying to deliver is going too far. Like I said before to Mr. King, first offer that came, not only do you want your cake, and you want to eat it, but you want us to spoon feed it to you. I'm sorry, I just can't go down that road. But I do think there is a potential for us to go back to the table and negotiate this. Sorry, and you said you wanted me to comment on something else?
Yeah, the release of your donors. What's your plan there?
So I don't have a huge campaign team. It's building slowly but surely. And so as far as my finances are concerned, the Local Authorities Elections Act says that if you're going to have a fundraiser, that you have to report the net contribution. And so I've had several fundraisers, and I have a lot of donors, maybe not as many as the mayor, but I do have a lot. And to put together my numbers to show you exactly what the net contribution was for each one, is actually going to take a bit of work. But there's two of my supporters that specifically asked for their names not to be revealed. And I suspect it's because they gave me as much as they might have given some of my competitors, and they might not want my competitors to know that they contributed to my campaign as well. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I suspect. But I'm going to reveal every other name as soon as I get a chance to put together my financials. It's going to take me time. My financial agent has a full-time job, so she's doing this for me on the side. Pro bono, I can't afford to pay her.
I think we have a question from the audience here. We're only going to have time to take this one.
Rick Campos, Remax First. When I heard you talking about changing the laws so we could borrow more money, you never disclosed what that debt ceiling limit would be or the debt ratio that it would be paid back at. And currently we have a federal government that is taking us into huge debt. We've got a provincial government that is taking us into huge debt. This sounds, to me, it sounds like another government that is taking us into debt. And you haven't explained what it would be used for. You've given us no idea of what the ceiling would be or the accountability to that. Thank you.
Just the two of us. I'm happy to go first on that question. Good question. And of course, with regard to our current debt, it goes through a lot of rigor to determine whether or not the debt is appropriate, whether or not it will impact our credit rating. And unlike the provincial government, we still maintain a AA+ rating with Standards & Poor, and mostly because we ensured that we have the appropriate amount of reserves and that we're not taking on more debt than we can actually support. So ultimately, it'll still go through the same level of rigor. There's no number that's been given. And by the way, this is not something that the City of Calgary is saying, we must have this. This is what the province has said, that we will allow the cities to explore as long as it makes financial sense. So just so we're clear, it doesn't mean that the city will take on more debt. It means it gives us the authority to take on more debt.
Rick, thanks very much for that question. So just to be clear, the debt ceiling thing that Andre was talking about is sort of a technical thing. And right now, the city's debt has been going down over the last 7 years as we've been paying off some of the bullet debt from the former provincial granting program that Premier Stelmach started, one of the best granting programs anywhere. And the vast majority of our debt, by the way, is actually in the water and wastewater utility. And that is entirely based on what we ran the last election on, what I called the suburban sprawl subsidy, because greenfield developers were paying nothing towards the development of water and wastewater in those neighborhoods. So I think about $3 billion, $2.5 billion of our debt is based on that. And we changed that in 2014 unanimously at council. So that source of growing debt is gone now. Now the debt will grow as a result of the way that we're financing the Green Line. Still well within the provincial, the current provincial regulations. City doesn't run an operating deficit, unlike provincial and federal governments. We never have, we never will. But we do take on debt to borrow, like mortgages for capital projects. And what is being suggested in the charter is actually not a huge change. It's essentially saying rather than the province, which as we know does not manage debt very well, being the ultimate arbiter of our debt, we'll let the rating agencies do it. So basically we'll have a rule in place that we have to maintain an investment grade credit rating. And currently we have a stellar credit rating, one of the best of any city in the country, and we would have to maintain that. Odds are we'd actually probably end up taking less debt than the current ceiling, but it basically takes that power away from the province and puts it into our own financial management system.
Bill, any thoughts on this before we move to closing?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've seen that both the federal and provincial governments rack up some pretty good dollars in debt, and I think we need to be very cautious and thoughtful if we're going to take on any more debt as a city, and remembering that if we take on the Olympics and take on a new arena, those things get factored in there. So we need to be very thoughtful and look to the long term on how we want to do that. And if there is a change of provincial government coming in the next 2 years, which some of the pundits say is quite possible, I have a sneaking suspicion one of the first areas that's going to see some cuts is going to be the support of municipalities. So we need to be aware that we're going to lose some support there in a couple of years. I expect we will. So just caution.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chabot, closing thoughts.
How much time do I have?
You now have 40 seconds left.
I'm going to try and keep it brief. Unlike others, I don't have dinner plans. I had work plans. Anyways, long and short of it, the main reason that I'm running is because I don't feel that we're traveling down a path that's fiscally prudent. I think we're taking on too much debt at the expense of property taxpayers. And so I said this before, and it's a number that Dave Broncani used to use, although the numbers arguably might not be exactly what I say, but 65-27-8 as opposed to 66-29-5 that Dave used to use. Those are the levels of taxes that you pay to each order of government, and I think that because of our huge infrastructure deficit, we talk about there's only one taxpayer. Well, our infrastructure deficit is a Canadian provincial municipal infrastructure deficit. We all are equally obligated to take on some of that responsibility. And I believe that we need to do more as far as advocating for provincial and federal transfers to aid us in our infrastructure deficit and to meet the growing needs of Calgary without impacting our operating budget. And our operating budget right now is being negatively impacted, and partially because we're using too much property tax dollars to pay for capital projects. And so that's part of the thing, part of the reason I'm running. I'm also believe that that citizens have lost respect in their council because they don't feel respected by their council. And I think it's important for all members of council to be encouraged through leadership that respect is something that is earned and not granted by virtue of a title, and the best way to earn respect is by showing respect and experience. Those are the three pillars that I'm running on. I think right now in this critical time with our city charter discussions and our MMGA discussions, which is Modernized Municipal Government Act, that it's critical that the person who's at the table discussing any potential changes that we will have can speak with authority and knowledge and understanding rather than having to go to school to learn what it is that we're promoting and why. We don't have that luxury of that time right now to be able to finalize those details, especially being as we're now going into the financial aspects of things. So those are the reasons I'm running and why I hope I can get your support on October 16th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, final word to you.
Thanks. We've talked a lot about some very specific issues today, which is great, and I'm happy to always do that. But I also want to talk a little bit about where we are as a community. Over the last 7 years, we have gone through some ups and some very big downs. Going into this fragile economic recovery, the economists tell us that the recession ended 6 months ago, but I'm not sure we're feeling that. Too many of our neighbors are still feeling the pain of unemployment and uncertainty about the future. But at the same time, we have to remember too that down-talking this place is not helping. This summer, we were named one of the top 5 cities in the world in which to live. For a city of 1.2 million people in the middle of the often frozen Canadian prairie, that's something. And it's something to be proud of. Our citizen satisfaction survey shows that our ratings of city services by citizens in fairness for what they're paying are the highest by far in the country. People are proud and happy to live here. And we do that, by the way, with the lowest property taxes of any big city in Canada. So these are things that we have to be building upon. And over the next few weeks, and hopefully over the next 4 years, I'll be looking to you as realtors and as contributors and builders of our community to help on that. In 3 areas. A better economy. How do we build infrastructure? How do we sell Calgary? How do we make it easier to do business with the city? How do we encourage small business, innovation, and entrepreneurship? Stronger and safer communities. What investments do we need to make sure everyone feels safe on every street and every neighborhood in this city? That we are speaking out against hatred and division that is preventing people from achieving a life of dignity and opportunity here in Calgary? How do we continue to invest in social infrastructure like rec centers and fire halls and libraries to make sure people enjoy living in this place and we can attract investment? And a smarter city hall. Over the last budget, we found $300 million in efficiencies that went straight to lowering your taxes. But we got to continue to do that. We got to continue to put the citizen at the center of what we do, put technology in place so that we can serve citizens more efficiently. But all of that together is in service of a very simple goal. And that simple goal is to create a place of prosperity and opportunity for everyone. A place where everyone belongs and a place where everyone has a chance to live a great Canadian life. That's really what this election is about. 7 years ago, you gave me an incredible opportunity to go to work every single day and work to make this community better for everyone. And we have a choice now. Do we want to keep our face boldly turned towards the future, or do we want to retrench into a smaller, meaner, less ambitious place? For me, the choice is very clear, and I hope that you'll give me the opportunity to continue to serve you for another 4 years.
I can't talk as good as these guys, and I think Nahan will smile when I say, when he talks before me at the end, I don't know whether I'm going to get a stern statement or a uplifting one. So the uplifting one was you had me on the edge of my seat today, I must say. And that thing about contributions to that you meant that to the community, not to my campaign for these guys, right? Or your campaign. I'd like to firstly thank all of you for being here. Appreciate that you take the time to care about what's going on in the community, as this is a critically important process, and I think it's a very important election for our city. I think we have some clear choices on October 16th about the direction our city will take for the next 4 years, and I think the better informed you are about that, the better our city will be, so thanks very much for that. Thanks very much to CREB for helping to make realtors better. I know, having dealt with many of them over the years on real estate transactions, they're a terribly professional group, almost without exception. I do, though, point out to my clients the difference in your fees versus mine on a purchase and sale. And they say, well, if you want to work weekends and evenings, you could do that. I go, yes, I could. So thank you very much. Please think about Bill Smith on October 16th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, on behalf of all the realtors here in Calgary, we thank you very much for being here today and talking about these issues. We wish we had 2 or 3 hours with you instead of just the one that we had, because I'm sure there's a lot of questions out here left, right, and center, but at least we're able to hear your opinions on the various different current issues. Thank you everyone for being here. Appreciate it.